The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the CBS studios in Los Angeles, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Outside, the familiar hum of Hollywood traffic provided a steady backdrop to the controlled chaos of television production. Camera operators adjusted their equipment while sound technicians ran final checks, their voices echoing through the cavernous studio space. Shaquille O'Neal sat in the green room, his massive 7-1 frame making the standard. Furniture looked like dollhouse pieces. At 52, the basketball legend had traded his Lakers jersey for a perfectly tailored navy suit, but his presence still commanded the room. His hands, which once palmed basketballs with ease, now fidgeted slightly with his phone as he scrolled through social media comments about his upcoming appearance on Second Chances, a popular reunion show that brought people back together after years apart. "5 minutes, Mr. O'Neal," a young production assistant called out, her clipboard clutched tightly against her chest. Despite working with celebrities daily, she still seemed intimidated by Shaq's imposing presence. "Thanks, sweetheart," Shaq replied with his trademark warm smile, the same one that had charmed fans for decades. But beneath the surface confidence, there was something different today, a nervous energy that his closest friends would recognize. He'd been unusually quiet during the pre-interview, giving shorter answers than usual, his mind seemingly elsewhere. The show's concept was simple: surprise reunions between people who had lost touch over the years. Shaq had agreed to appear after the producers reached out about reuniting him with some of his old LSU teammates from the early 90s. What he didn't know was that the producers had been working on something much more personal and much more surprising. As he walked toward the stage, Shaq's thoughts drifted back to Louisiana, to his college days when life was simpler, and the future felt infinite. The studio lights grew brighter as he approached, and he could hear the audience settling into their seats, their excited chatter filling the air. Host Maria Rodriguez, a seasoned television personality known for her ability to handle emotional moments with grace, waited at center stage with her warm, professional smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome NBA legend, entrepreneur, and all-around entertainment icon, Shaquille O'Neal." The audience erupted in applause as Shaq emerged from behind the curtain, waving and flashing that million-dollar grin that had made him beloved far beyond the basketball court. The interview began comfortably enough. Maria asked about his current projects, his family, and his transition from sports to entertainment. Shaq was in his element, cracking jokes and sharing stories that had the audience laughing and engaged. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on his business ventures, his work as a sports analyst, and his various entertainment pursuits. "Now, Shaq," Maria said, her tone shifting slightly to become more intimate, "we brought you here today because we know how much your relationships mean to you. You've always talked about the importance of the people who were there during your journey to greatness." Shaq nodded, settling back in his chair. "Absolutely. I've been blessed to have incredible people in my life, from my coaches to my teammates to my family. Those early relationships shaped who I became." "Speaking of early relationships," Maria continued, glancing briefly at her notes, "we reached out to some of your old LSU teammates, and we have a special surprise for you." The lights dimmed slightly, and a video screen descended from the ceiling. Shaq's face lit up as images of his college basketball days began playing. Action shots of him dominating the paint, candid moments with teammates, and scenes from LSU's campus in Baton Rouge. The audience watched as a younger, leaner Shaq dunked with thunderous force, his teammates celebrating around him. "Man, look at that baby face," Shaq laughed, pointing at the screen. "I had hair back then." But as the montage continued, something unexpected happened. Mixed in with the basketball footage were glimpses of campus life, students walking between classes, the sprawling oak trees that LSU was famous for, and brief shots of social gatherings and dances. The camera lingered on one particular scene, a college party where young Shaq could be seen talking animatedly with a beautiful young woman with warm brown eyes and a radiant smile. Shaq's expression changed subtly. His smile remained, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or maybe just the bittersweet pang of old memories surfacing unexpectedly. The video montage faded to black, and Maria turned back to Shaq with a knowing smile. The studio audience was still buzzing with appreciation for the nostalgic footage, but Shaq seemed quieter now, more contemplative. His large hands rested on the arms of his chair, and for a moment the usually animated superstar was perfectly still. "Those were some incredible times," Maria said gently. "College is where so many of us form our most meaningful relationships, not just with teammates or classmates, but sometimes our first real connections of the heart." Shaq's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. In all his years of interviews, through championship celebrations and personal challenges, he had mastered the art of maintaining his public persona. But something about Maria's tone, combined with that last image from the video, had caught him off guard. "Yeah," he said slowly, his voice carrying a weight that hadn't been there moments before. "College it's a special time. You're figuring out who you are, what you want to become. And the people who are there with you during that journey." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "They see you before the world knows your name. They know the real you." Maria leaned forward slightly, her journalist instincts sensing the emotional undercurrent. "Speaking of people who knew the real you, Shaq, we did some digging into your LSU days, and we discovered that there was someone very special during those years, someone who meant a great deal to you." The color seemed to drain slightly from Shaq's face. His media-trained smile faltered for just a second, so briefly that most viewers might have missed it, but the cameras caught everything. In that moment, the confident entertainer was replaced by something more vulnerable, more human. "Maria," he said carefully, "what exactly are you getting at?" Before Maria could answer, the audience began to stir. There was movement in the back of the studio near the entrance where guests typically made their surprise appearances. Shaq didn't notice at first. His attention was focused entirely on Maria, trying to read her expression and anticipate what was coming next. "Well," Maria said, her smile growing warmer, "we reached out to many people from your LSU days. Most were happy to share stories about your basketball prowess, your leadership on the team, your infectious personality. But one person had very different stories to tell." Now Shaq was definitely uncomfortable. His hands gripped the chair arms tighter, and he shifted his weight, a nervous habit from his playing days that observant fans would recognize. "Look, Maria, I don't know where you're going with this, but she told us about late-night study sessions in the library," Maria continued, her voice taking on the gentle rhythm of someone sharing a treasured story. "About walks around the LSU lakes when you needed to clear your head before big games. About a young man who was already becoming a giant in basketball, but was still figuring out how to be giant in life." The audience was completely quiet now, sensing the shift in energy. Even the camera operators seemed to move more carefully, instinctively understanding they were witnessing something significant. Shaq's breathing had changed. It was subtle, but his chest rose and fell a little more deliberately, as if he was trying to maintain control. "Maria," he said again, but his voice was softer now, almost pleading. "She told us about promises made under Louisiana stars," Maria continued, "about dreams shared between two young people who thought they had all the time in the world, about a love that was pure and innocent and real, before fame and fortune and the demands of an extraordinary life pulled you in different directions." Tears were beginning to form in Shaq's eyes, though he was fighting them. In 3 decades of public life, very few people had ever seen Shaquille O'Neal cry. He was the fun-loving giant, the gentle giant, the successful businessman and entertainer. But he was not the vulnerable giant, the heartbroken giant, the giant who had loved and lost like any ordinary man. 30 years, Shaq," Maria said softly. 30 years since you last saw Keisha Williams." The name hit him like a physical blow. Shaq's composure finally cracked completely. His head dropped into his hands, those massive hands that had won championships and signed autographs for millions of fans, and his shoulders began to shake slightly. The audience was dead silent. This wasn't the reunion show moment they had expected. This was witnessing something sacred and private being shared with the world. When Shaq finally looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "How did you—" he started, then stopped. Is she here?" Maria's smile was radiant with compassion. "Shaq, she never forgot you either. In fact, she's been following your career all these years, cheering for you from afar. She raised two beautiful children, became a teacher, just like she always dreamed. And when our producers reached out to her about this reunion—" Shaq was looking around the studio now, his head turning toward the audience area where movement continued near the back entrance. His heart was pounding so hard, he was sure the microphone would pick it up. "She said there wasn't anywhere else in the world she'd rather be." The studio lights shifted, creating a spotlight near the back of the audience seating area. Shaq's eyes followed the light, his breath catching in his throat as the crowd began to part. From the back of the studio, walking slowly but with quiet dignity, came a woman who looked both exactly the same and completely different from the young college student he remembered. Keisha Williams was now 50, her once long hair styled in an elegant shoulder-length cut, with subtle gray highlights that caught the studio lights. She wore a simple but beautiful navy dress that spoke of quiet confidence rather than flashy attention-seeking. Her warm brown eyes, those same eyes that had captivated a young basketball player 30 years ago, were focused entirely on Shaq as she made her way down the aisle. Time seemed to move in slow motion. The audience members she passed seemed to sense the magnitude of the moment, many of them wiping away tears of their own as they witnessed this deeply personal reunion unfolding before them. Camera operators moved with unprecedented care, capturing every angle while trying to remain invisible, understanding they were documenting something extraordinary. Shaq had risen from his chair without realizing it, his 7'1" frame towering over the stage as he watched Keisha approach. His hands hung at his sides, and for perhaps the first time in his adult life, the man who had never met a stranger, who could command any room with his presence and humor, was completely speechless. As Keisha reached the front of the audience area, she paused at the base of the steps leading up to the stage. The studio was so quiet that the hum of the cameras and the distant Los Angeles traffic outside seemed amplified. She looked up at him, and 30 years collapsed into nothing. "Hello, Shaquille," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the studio's sound system. It was deeper now than it had been at 20, mellowed by time and experience, but unmistakably the same voice that had once whispered encouragement before his biggest games and shared dreams during those long Louisiana nights. "Keisha?" he managed to say, her name coming out as barely more than a whisper. "I can't— How are you here? How are you real?" She smiled. Then, and it was like watching the sun rise. The same smile that had made a young Shaq forget about basketball for hours at a time. The same smile he had carried in his memory through championships and defeats, marriages and divorces, triumphs and heartaches. "I've been real this whole time," she said gently, beginning to climb the steps to the stage. "I've just been living my life, watching yours from a distance, and wondering if you ever thought about those days at LSU." By the time she reached the stage, Shaq had moved toward her, meeting her halfway. The size difference was almost comical, his massive frame making her appear tiny beside him. But there was nothing funny about the moment. This was profound, sacred, the kind of human connection that transcends physical appearance or worldly success. "Think about those days?" Shaq repeated, his voice growing stronger but still thick with emotion. "Keisha, there hasn't been a month in 30 years when I haven't thought about you. Haven't wondered where you were, what you were doing, if you were happy." Maria watched from her host position, tears streaming down her own face as she witnessed the reunion she had helped orchestrate. The television cameras captured every angle, but even the most sophisticated equipment couldn't fully convey the emotional electricity in the room. "I know," Keisha said softly, reaching up to touch his arm. Her hand looked impossibly small against his massive bicep, but the gesture was infinitely tender. "I know because I felt the same way. Every time I saw you on TV, every championship, every commercial, every appearance, I was so proud of what you became, But I always wondered about the boy I knew, the one who was afraid he wasn't smart enough for college, who worried about making his mother proud, who used to hold my hand while we walked around the lake and talked about changing the world. The audience was openly weeping now. This wasn't just a celebrity reunion. This was watching two souls reconnect across 3 decades of separation, success, heartbreak, and growth. "I was so stupid to let you go," Shaq said, his voice breaking completely. "The NBA, the pressure, everyone telling me I had to focus only on basketball. I thought I was making the right choice for both of us. I thought you deserved better than the crazy life I was heading into." "Shaquille," Keisha said, stepping closer to him. "Look at me." He did, and the cameras captured a moment of pure vulnerability from one of the most recognizable faces in the world. "You weren't stupid. We were 20 years old. You had the chance to achieve something incredible, and I wanted that for you. I've never regretted supporting your dreams, even when it meant letting you go. What I regretted was never telling you that letting you go broke my heart too." The silence in the studio was complete, except for the quiet sounds of people crying. Audience members, crew members, even the usually stone-faced. Camera operators were struggling to maintain their composure. "Did you—" Shaq started, then stopped, seeming afraid of the answer. "Did you ever get married? Have the family you always wanted?" Keisha's smile was bittersweet. "I did. I married a good man, a teacher like me. We had 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl. He passed away 5 years ago. Cancer." "Oh, Keisha," Shaq said, instinctively reaching out to embrace her. When his massive arms encircled her small frame, something in both of them seemed to settle, as if pieces of themselves they hadn't even realized were missing had suddenly clicked back into place. The embrace lasted longer than might have been appropriate for television, but no one in the studio would have dared to interrupt it. This was bigger than entertainment. This was about human connection, about love that transcends time and circumstance, about the courage to be vulnerable in front of millions of people. When Shaq and Keisha finally separated from their embrace, both of their faces were streaked with tears. The audience was on their feet, applauding not just for the reunion they had witnessed, but for the raw humanity they had been privileged to see. Maria wiped her own eyes as she approached the two of them, understanding that she was witnessing career-defining television. "Keisha," Maria said gently, "what was it like to watch Shaq's career from afar all these years?" Keisha took a moment to compose herself, though she never let go of Shaq's hand. Their fingers intertwined looked almost impossible, his massive hand completely engulfing hers. But the connection was unmistakably real. "It was pride and heartache all mixed together," she said honestly. "Pride because I knew the man behind the superstar. I knew how hard he worked, how much he cared about people, how big his heart was. But heartache because—" She paused, looking up at Shaq. "Because I always wondered what would have happened if we had found a way to make it work." Shaq squeezed her hand gently. "I used to practice what I would say if I ever saw you again," he admitted. "For 30 years, I had this speech prepared about how sorry I was, how I never should have chosen basketball over you, how you were the best thing that ever happened to me and I was too young and stupid to fight for us." "And now?" Keisha asked. "Now I realize the speech doesn't matter," Shaq said, his voice clear and strong for the first time since she had appeared. "What matters is that you're here, that you're okay, that you lived a good life, that you raised children and made a difference as a teacher and had love in your life, even after I wasn't there to give it to you." The audience was hanging on every word, but this conversation felt intimate, despite being broadcast to millions. There was something about the authenticity of the moment that made everyone feel like they were witnessing something private and sacred. "Shaq," Maria interjected gently, "what do you want people to know about this moment?" Shaq was quiet for a long time, still holding Keisha's hand, still processing the impossibility of her presence. When he finally spoke, his words came from somewhere deeper than his usual entertainment persona. "I want people to know that success isn't just about championships or money or fame," he said. "I won 4 NBA championships, made hundreds of millions of dollars, became a household name around the world. But standing here right now, holding the hand of the woman who knew me before any of that happened, who loved me when I was just a scared kid from Louisiana trying to figure out his place in the world, this feels like the biggest victory of my life. He turned to look at Keisha again. I want people to know that some connections are so deep, so real, that they survive decades of separation. That love, real love, doesn't just disappear because life gets complicated, or because you make choices that take you in different directions. Keisha nodded, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. And I want people to know that it's never too late, she added. It's never too late to forgive, to reconnect, to acknowledge what someone meant to you. We can't go back and change the past, but we can honor what we shared and be grateful for how it shaped us. The camera zoomed in on their joined hands, his massive and hers tiny, both showing the marks of time and experience, both trembling slightly with the emotion of the moment. What happens now? Maria asked. Shaq and Keisha looked at each other, and for a moment it was just the two of them again. 20 years old and full of dreams under the Louisiana stars. Now we're friends, Keisha said simply. Now we stay in touch. Now we don't let another 30 years pass without knowing how the other person is doing. Now we remember that some people come into your life and change everything, Shaq added. And even if they can't stay forever, even if life takes you in different directions, they remain a part of who you are. As the show concluded and the credits began to roll, the cameras captured one final image. Shaq and Keisha, still holding hands, still talking quietly, still marveling at the impossibility and beauty of their reunion. Within hours of the show's broadcast, the clip had exploded across social media. Shaq First Love began trending worldwide as millions of people shared the video, adding their own stories of lost love, missed connections, and the courage it takes to be vulnerable. The moment when Shaq first saw Keisha walking down that aisle, the way his face crumpled with emotion, the tenderness of their embrace, it all resonated with people who had experienced their own great loves and great losses. Comments poured in from around the world. I'm not crying. You're crying. This is what real love looks like. Shaq showing us that even giants have hearts that can break and heal. 30 years and that love never died. This gives me hope. The way he looked at her, like she was the only person in the world. This is why Shaq is everyone's favorite athlete. Real recognizes real. The video accumulated over 50 million views in its first week, becoming one of the most watched reunion moments in television history. But beyond the viral fame, beyond the social media buzz, the real impact was in the conversations it started. About first love, about the roads not taken, about the courage to be vulnerable, and about the enduring power of human connection. For Shaq and Keisha, the cameras had captured something precious. The moment when two people who had shaped each other's lives were given a second chance to acknowledge that influence, to express gratitude for what they had shared, and to prove that some bonds are truly unbreakable. In a world that often celebrates surface-level connections and temporary attractions, their reunion reminded millions of viewers that real love, the kind that sees you, knows you, and accepts you completely, is worth celebrating, worth honoring, and worth the risk of vulnerability that comes with opening your heart, even after 30 years of protection. The giant of basketball had revealed his most human moment, and in doing so had touched hearts around the world.